Hello, I am Devin Moore, Humanity Rising Ambassador, founder of the Race to Speak Up anti-bullying organization, and your host of Humanity Rising's Mindful Connections podcast. Thank you for joining us today. We partnered with Open Mind Health to bring you mental health professionals from across the country to educate and give you advice in real time on subjects like today's topic, which is trauma. If you have any questions during the episode, please feel free to just put them in the chat. Our guests will answer. Also, we'll have a Q&A at the end where you can openly ask your questions. So feel free to unmute during that time. Joining us today is Melissa Brinson, a clinical manager at Open Mind Health. Throughout her career, Melissa has been working with individuals of all ages through their healing journey. Her specialties they include addiction and trauma. As a certified rehabilitation counselor, she has assisted individuals address and achieve career and vocational goals as well. Her approach is integrative/holistic in nature, where she explores the whole person while blending elements from different approaches according to each client's needs. Hi, Melissa. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Okay, yeah. So you've been in mental health or working in mental health since the late 90s,
Mhm,
starting with addiction work. What
mhm.
inspired you to enter this field and how has your approach evolved over the years?
Okay, so I got started, I got my master's degree, and I didn't become an addiction specialist until 2007. But I'll tell you what led me down this path was my dad. My dad is a PhD psychologist, and I remember sitting around as a child, like reading his books and looking in his videos. And I fell across this video, and it was about a man. His name is Phineas Gage. And Phineas was a 19th century railroad foreman, and he survived this horrific accident in 1848 when a 13-pound tamping iron was driven through his skull and it destroyed his whole frontal lobe. And his survival was absolutely remarkable, but the injury profoundly changed his personality and turned him into a profane individual. It just changed who he was. And that's where I was like, wow, that to me, it just kind of got me started. And so I started reading more of his books. Went to undergrad down here, and then took a gap year, and then got my PhD. So my dad 100% inspired me. My approach has evolved over the years. Um, because when you get out of therapy school, you just kind of start working with people, and you work under a supervisor, you work as an intern, and then you're able to kind of shape what specialty you want to get into. And I picked addiction because I saw a need, quite frankly. I looked around in my community. There was a famous basketball player that accidentally overdosed on it was when crack cocaine was just coming out, and he overdosed after one use and passed away. So that's kind of what got me started in that direction.
Thank you for sharing that. It's interesting that you are really focusing in on addiction just simply because that's actually one of the classes that I'm currently taking as a psychology major in
Hmm.
college. So it's addictive behaviors, and it's kind of just opening my eyes a bit more to just how detrimental the effects of addiction and things alike especially for the younger population, especially for those who are going through bullying and need kind of an escape route.
Hmm.
I mean, and the only reason why I'm bringing up bullying is just because of the central cause of Humanity Rising and my
Right.
organization. But it's definitely something that we really need to dive deep in on and talk more about.
Hmm.
I know you study both clinical sexology and trauma treatment. How do these areas of expertise connect in the work that you currently do?
So, in my path of addiction counseling, I also became certified as a sex addiction therapist. So that led me to pursue my PhD in clinical sexology. And clinical sexology covers a lot of aspects of human sexuality, including development dysfunction and sexual abuse, treatment of sexual offenders, and usually there is there's some sort of trauma behind it. Like it's like abuse. Addiction is the symptom, really, not the disease, even though we call it a disease. But there's usually something going on under that. The trauma, reaching the trauma usually helps with the other things that they're dealing with, if there is trauma.
Okay. And I know you also work with EMDR. I'd love for you to first explain what EMDR is and then just what led you to train in EMDR and how does it help people process trauma differently from traditional talk therapy?
So again, in EMDR, I saw a need. I worked working with, like I said, individuals with addiction. Um, we we unpack a lot of trauma, and whenever I would go and try to refer them to a trauma specialist or somebody that was trained in EMDR, there was a waiting list, and I was like, well, I need to get trained. So that's kind of where it came from. And it is different from talk therapy in a few ways. So EMDR, their approach to healing is different. EMDR uses bilateral stimulation to key areas of the brain involved in processing and regulating emotions and memory and stress. EMDR helps reactivate the brain's natural ability to process trauma and memories where they become stuck. Talk therapy more so treats symptoms, and they do that through talk and coping skills and psychoanalytic kind of things where you talk about, hey, we talk about your childhood and that kind of thing. That is the primary difference, is that EMDR treats trauma and talk therapy treats symptoms. EMDR is relatively new. And it started off with veterans. It was war veterans when is kind of how we got started with EMDR. And now we know that it's more than just we can treat more than just trauma.
That's interesting. I did not know that it was relatively new. I've heard about it from my psychology classes and just how it really focuses in on like deep trauma and stuff. So thank
Mhm.
you for kind of adding on to our all of our knowledge. And everyone, I just want to make sure that you guys know, feel free to turn your cameras on. We don't bite. Feel free to like really let us know that you're there listening. Um, and also, since we are talking about trauma, tell us what emotions or what feelings do you typically feel when you're going through stress? Put that in the chat. I typically feel anxiety. And now, my next question for you, Melissa, is for young listeners, how would you explain what happens to the brain when someone experiences trauma?
Okay. Um, I'm going to put this in the simplest terms as possible because it can get kind of complex when you start talking about areas of the brain. So if any questions, again, I'll be glad to ask later. So when a person experiences trauma, their brain shifts into survival mode. The brain is hardwired, and it's an evolutionary response designed to prioritize safety above all else. And this is what we call the fight, flight, or freeze state, and that involves a cascade of changes in the brain's chemistry, and it doesn't the way it functions, and particularly in three regions, and those three regions are the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the prefrontal cortex. So you've got the amygdala, which is the fear center, and the hippocampus, which is the memory center, and then the prefrontal cortex, which is the rational part of the brain. That's the brain that does all the executive function. So that's the simplest way to put it.
I see exactly what you're saying. Oh, actually, we have a couple of different comments. When people are feeling stress or trauma, they
Mhm,
feel anxious, anxiety. Some comments are saying mostly anger,
mhm.
overwhelmed. I
Yep,
typically
all
feel
symptoms.
stressed and overwhelmed, anxious, overwhelmed. Yeah, we're getting a lot of anxious and overwhelmed. Yeah. Oh, do you have anything else to add on to that, Melissa?
Yeah, I was going to add another key component to some trauma symptoms are hypervigilance, meaning that they're always looking around, and the nightmares or flashbacks, and avoidance. Anxiety works because you avoid the things that make you anxious, and that's a big component of trauma as well.
It really does take over a person's life when experiencing trauma,
Hmm.
especially through bullying, going through repeated instances of hate and, being targeted for something that makes you repeatedly, the power imbalance. It very well
Hmm.
leads to
Yep.
that negative, extremely negative, impactful state. And you're talking about the different areas of the brain. Like, I mean, and honestly, like I'm still learning, but I know I
Mhm,
can more so talk about like specifically with the hippocampus and, the memory. It's like if
mhm,
your mind is so focused on um the pain that you're going through, the stress, the trauma, it can literally distract you from whatever you're trying to focus on. It can
mhm.
cloud your memory, all these different things.
Yep.
It's so extreme. It's so extreme.
Yeah,
So
that's because when a trauma hits your brain is like safety. We need to run, we need to play dead, we need to fight, and so it shuts everything else down.
it's truly alarming. So, how does brain development in children and teens impact the way that they process and recover from trauma?
Okay, so the brain develops from the bottom up and the inside out. And I'm going to call this the brain triangle. And this right here at the bottom is the brain stem. We call that the lizard brain. That's the part of the brain that kind of regulates our temperature. It reminds us to breathe. It reminds us to blink. It's over our blood pressure, that kind of thing. Reptilian brain, I think, is what people call it. And then the top part of the brain up here is the prefrontal is the cortex, and that develops in that's the last thing that's the last part of your brain that develops when you're growing up. And for sometimes you can it doesn't develop fully until you're like 25. So we'll start with the brain developing from the bottom up, and from the most basic survival functions to the most rational thoughts, so which is at the top of the triangle. And trauma can disrupt the process and have lasting effects on how the on a developing brain. It's not a life sentence. The brain has a lot of neuroplasticity, and it can adapt to change, and that means recovery is possible. However, with kids, because the brain is developing, it impacts it differently, and it just and it just depends on also where a child is in development. Like early development, 0 to 6, is a little bit different from middle child, which 7 to 12, which is a little bit different from 12 to 18.
I see what you're saying. It's interesting that you bring that up. I'm saying everything is interesting because it is interesting to me. But anyways, but
That's
the
fair.
reason
That's
why
fair. That's
I
why we're here.
yeah, exactly, exactly. But the reason why I'm saying that is because um it's like kids are sponges, like, well, you definitely know, like, literally, kids are sponges having as you're saying, like, take so many
Yeah.
different things in. And so it makes me think to myself, since unfortunately a lot of people are experiencing trauma, this extreme stress, and a variety of the devastating feeling of going through that pain and stuff, I want to quickly turn to the audience. Guys, what are some potential coping strategies that you think people might use when going through trauma? I know something that I would use is yoga because I know it's very relaxing. So yeah, we'll take feel free to add that into the chat while I ask you, Melissa. So I know
Mhm.
you work with a variety of different clients. What are some coping strategies that you've seen work well for people trying to manage trauma symptoms like anxiety or flashbacks or even avoidance?
We can talk about there's unhealthy coping strategies, and then there's help it there's coping strategies that are adaptive. So, and I don't like to use unhealthy. I use adaptive and maladaptive. So some people to cope with trauma, they go to drugs. Some people they avoid they avoid trauma. I used to be, case in point, I used to be afraid to fly. And so that, not because of a trauma, but again, anxiety works because it avoids the thing that makes you anxious. Some coping strategies that I think people can learn and use very quickly. There's some resourcing that we have in we have EMDR. There's full reprocessing, and then there's resources. And we start with resources, and we use things like finger breathing. We calm, safe space, butterfly taps. But some more traditional things that people can do is meditate. There is a process. It's called DBT. That's dialectical behavioral therapy, and that helps people with mindfulness, emotional regulation, interpersonal skills, stress response, and that kind of thing. And then just eating, and I think moving, meaning exercising, sleeping, like good sleep hygiene, and also your diet. Those are some basic things that can get you started in your healing journey.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm seeing a lot of the audience members are saying a lot of the different things that you were saying. Beatrice is talking about deep
Mhm.
breathing therapy. Gavin's talking about
Mhm.
eating, going back to diet. Lena's saying journaling. Then Caitlin's saying listen to music, listen to music. We have a few others saying watching shows, meditation. I know
Mhm.
another therapist that I work with told me that like there's like a variety of different, meditation apps and stuff.
There is.
Which honestly, I'm like, listen, we all got phones, so we can easily download that as some sort of means of beginning coping strategies when dealing with
Right.
trauma. So
And I'll build off of that too. The one thing about the one thing about anxiety is when people are anxious, they're generally worried about what's going to happen in the future. And depression is the opposite. They're sad or upset about what happened in the past. So when you're grounded or living in the moment, it's impossible to be anxious or depressed because you're living in the present. That's why it's called a gift. But you're living in the present. So doing some of that mindfulness and grounding, really does help with that. And I noticed that one of your audience members said that when they, to deal with stress and anxiety, they turn to eating. And so I like to teach my clients to do mindful eating, meaning they experience what they're eating with all of their senses. They pay attention to what the food feels like in their mouth, what it tastes like, what it sounds like when they're eating it, what it smells like before they eat it, what it looks like. And if you really that helps with two things. Number one, it helps you eat slower, and number two, it helps you that it helps you stay grounded. And again, remember, if you're grounded, you're in the moment, you're in the present, and you're not anxious, worried about what might happen, and you're not depressed, worried about what happened in the past.
I think grounding is honestly such a big, very important thing to have, especially when we're in modern day and there's just so many things being thrown at us. And so,
Mm-hmm.
guys, also, I know if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat. We'll also have Q&A later because I feel like I'm seeing some people raise their hands. But anyway, but going back to what I was saying, so I'm like, there's so many different things coming at us that can very well lead to trauma and very well lead to extreme stress, very well lead to anxiety. Tell me more about how young people can blend different coping tools like mindfulness, movement, and creative outlets into a daily routine that supports healing.
Okay, it has to be intentional. So that means you schedule a time and you make a commitment to do it for X amount for however long you want to do it. So if it's part of your routine, just like getting up, taking a shower, going to work out, going to school, you have to be intentional about doing your meditation and doing your grounding. It can't be something, oh, and the other thing about it is if you are practicing these skills and you have, let's say, a panic attack, then you've already got those tools in your toolbox. It's like practicing for a sports event. You don't want to just go out and play basketball if you're going to go play against the Bulls. You got to practice so that you're prepared. So it's the same thing. It's the same idea as practicing resourcing and coping skills. So the biggest thing about that is be intentional about it, schedule and schedule a time, and this is a gift you're giving to yourself. Remember that this is something that you're doing for yourself and your own mental health. And I recommend that for my clients to do it every day, and just be intentional and find a time and a place.
Yeah, and let's talk more about community involvement also. And by community, I mean it could be programs, it could be
Hmm.
school staff, it could be like a variety of different things that go into the
Hmm.
community. What exactly is your take on the role of community and peer support in recovering from trauma?
That's a great question. And I'm gonna go off on a little bit of a tangent. And I'll try not to be too boring. So humans typically want to be part of a group, a tribe. They don't want to get voted off the island. Anybody watch was that Survivor or whatever, the reality show where people get voted off the island? Nobody wants to be voted off the island. And evolution, we have evolutionary biological psychology that offers really powerful evidence for the need for community and belonging. And it's not just a cultural preference, but it's fundamental in survival strategy. For early humans or cavemen, we like to call them early humans now, living alone was, quite frankly, it was dangerous. The communities provided protection from predators. There was cooperative hunting, division of labor, sharing resources, not to mention reproduction. Social connections trigger a sense of release of good hormones and oxytocin that promotes bonding and reduces stress. So that's why we saw a lot of issues, particularly in children during COVID, because they were isolated. So controversially, social isolation. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I've been talking all day. So social isolation can lead to increased stress hormones, negative thinking. It can impact it can impact your physical health. So the role of community in recovery is really valuable, which is why I really love support groups. And therapeutic groups can be beneficial. And it doesn't have to be a PTSD support group. It can be something that you like. If you like to read, you can join a book club. If you like to crochet, you can do that. It just being your brain being around other brains helps your brain heal. That makes sense.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Having
Yeah.
a safe space can truly go a very far way.
Hmm.
And honestly, speaking of safe spaces, I know that, or at least I quickly brought up earlier with the whole like bullying and just kind of a little
Hmm.
bit more of how that really impacts people. Quickly, to everyone listening, I kind of want you guys to first let me know, or not me, let us know what are some signs that a person's mental health may be either declining or just that they're going through something negative, that they're going through something very painful. Because I mean, we definitely talked about this before, but what are some other signs that you guys are thinking of? I know one thing that I typically see, kind of going back to the isolate. Oh, we already see some isolating, but going back
We're
to like
seeing
the
some good responses.
isolation
Yep.
and stuff.
Hmm.
So, but Melissa, so I want to ask you, especially as it relates to one of our central causes being bullying prevention at Humanity Rising and Race to Speak Up. Bullying can create deep emotional wounds. What are
Mm.
some early signs a young person's mental health is being impacted by bullying?
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing that we'll notice is a change in behavior, right? Abrupt changes in behavior, social withdrawal, failing grades, aggression, changes in appetite, mood swings, not wanting to go to school, just being argumentative with your parents, and just stop doing things that just not doing things that you want to do. And when I think about this, I don't know if you guys has anybody seen Inside Out and know Riley, the main character? She is. They have done a really good job on explaining how the brain works in kids, and just how things can and just how messages can impact them. And she was a sweet little girl and all that stuff, and then she got real aggressive playing was she playing hockey, I think. But that's a textbook. That Disney did a really good job on, or was that Disney or Pixar? They did a really good job on explaining that. Some of them you'll notice, some of them might turn to drugs or alcohol. They act out. They might act out sexually. They would. You're really watching a child change in front of your eyes. If they've been exposed to serious bullying or trauma.
Yeah. Honestly, when it comes to the whole like the things that people turn to, the substances, the alcohol, I feel like people honestly need to have a bit more of an understand. I mean, it's perfect that we have podcasts like this and mental health professionals like yourself to also add on to this knowledge. But I really do think that we need to have a lot more people speaking about it because people may bring up alcohol and say, oh, it suppresses these feelings but it suppresses it only for a little bit amount of time. Plus, alcohol also works as a depressant. So once you're
Hmm.
feeling sober, it's like you're still going to be going more into that depressed state. It'll
Right.
almost just become a cycle. And so it's like
Hmm.
we need to have more education on that. We need to
Right.
have more education on things like trauma so that it doesn't go
Hmm.
down such a dark hole, one that's really hard to climb out of. Feel free to add on to that.
Sure. So alcohol and drugs also, you remember how we talked about how the brain develops from the back to the front and inside out. When you add drugs and alcohol to that, it disrupts your brain's development. And so your brain, it doesn't it doesn't know how to process things. it gets in the way of a healthy brain cycle in kids. And like I said, and I do want to remind you that, like I said, we do know that the brain can heal itself. But so particularly in kids, it's and the thing about the thing about trauma, like if you're are dealing with complex trauma or significant trauma at the age of 14, you kind of get stuck there, emotionally, if that makes sense. So we do know that is also, and you put drugs and alcohol on top of that, you're it's just, it's just not helpful.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even looking at the chat, and I know you brought up a lot of great points, but yeah, even our audience members, a lot of you guys are high schoolers, and you guys know a lot of the signs can look like losing interest in things, isolating yourself, personality changes, a lot of the things that Melissa is telling us right now. Less talkative, mood swings, not participating, taking a step back. It's so many unfortunate signs, but I mean, they do serve as signs. Checking in on
Mhm.
someone is very important. Now,
Mhm.
guys, I'm so happy that, you all are very open to talking. I want to transition us into our Q&A. So if
Mhm.
anyone has a question, feel free to either put it in the chat or either raise your hand or honestly like visually raise your hand and then like I'll just tell you to like unmute or you can honestly just openly unmute and then just ask the question. I'll give you guys Oh, Gavin, you have a question? Okay, well feel free to unmute and then ask it.
Okay, so one of my questions is like I know there are some certain calming noises like rain dropping and
Mhm.
certain ASMRs.
Mhm.
Why do they give us those like endorphins and stuff? And
Because they tickle the right part of the brain. That's the best way I can tell you. And that being said, with ASMR and EMDR, because EMDR is bilateral, and I've noticed this on social media, that you can actually put on your headphones and listen to sounds that go in and out of each ear. I can't remember what it's called, but I can get back to you, Devin, and let you know what it is, where that can be helpful. But yeah, and also, uh, some people do not like that ASMR. It gives them the creeps. It doesn't calm them down. It doesn't help.
yeah,
They don't like it. I'm one of
because
those.
yeah, I like raindrop noises, but whenever I hear an ASMR, it just doesn't do it.
Yeah, yeah, it's not for me either. I'm more for the bilateral stimulation in the ears. That is I actually use, that's a tool I use when I administer EMDR. But that was a really, really good question. Thank you for that.
Mhm. Thank you, Miss Melissa.
You can call me Melissa.
Thank you, Gavin. Okay, we have some questions in the chat, but also, guys, feel free to just keep the questions coming. So, the first question is, oh, and I love how we're using the word mindful, like mindful connections. How do you stay mindful? Or Antonella, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, is asking, how do you stay mindful and present when you're managing a busy classroom or a stressful day?
Okay, so you use all your five senses, and you pay attention to what's going in the classroom. And I call this the 5 4 3 2 1 technique. And so what you can do is you look around and absorb five things that you can see, four things that you can hear, three things that you can touch, two things that you can smell, and one thing that you can taste. And that will help you stay grounded, but nobody really knows what you're doing. You don't look like you're not tapping, you're not finger breathing. You're just looking around, and you're being present in the moment, and you're paying attention to what's around you.
We have a few more questions, actually. So, Caitlin is saying, yeah, how do I stay present in school and manage my stress with difficult classes? Also, making sure I'm not drifting from friends.
Make sure you're not drifting from friends.
I think you mean like drifting away from friends or something. If I'm correct, Caitlin? Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah. So again, go back and be intentional. I wish I could see the questions that you're asking. I'm sorry. Yeah, but be
Yeah,
intentional in it. Okay, so let me address this with some resources. So if you find yourself that you're kind of drifting away, there's a technique that it's called behavior activation. And that kind of that is a technique that we use I use it generally to help people who are depressed that have a lack of motivation and have a hard time getting up and taking a shower, and having a hard time getting up and interacting with people. And that's slowly engaging in things and doing things until until you kind of get through the stressor. So sometimes I'll give myself I'll use myself, and I'll do some self disclosure here. I used to run half marathons. I was doing one half marathon a month, and I was training, and I got out of it. I got out of it, amongst some. I had some personal things that went on, and I just got out of it, and I had a hard time getting back on it. So one thing I did, oh, and I'm still working on it, with regards to behavior activation, is I'm being intentional, and I'm saying, okay, today I'm going to put my running shoes on, and I'm going to do that 3 days a week. And if I happen to go running, then that's a plus. And so I'll do that. So I'm going to do that for 3 weeks. And then I'm going to put my shoes on and I'm going to walk a mile. And then do that for a little while. So you make these small little goals until you're back to yourself. So the answer is to be intentional. To be intentional about your engaging. And if you're having some difficulties concentrating, it might be a good idea to do a really thorough psychological evaluation to see if there's not some anxiety, some depression, some ADHD, some neurodivergent traits. That would be the other information that I would give that person.
Thank you. Caitlin is also saying thank you. Okay.
You're
And
welcome, Caitlin. Thank you. That was a good question as well. Thank you for asking.
yeah, you guys are coming up with amazing questions.
Mhm.
We'll take, oh, I think we have time for about 2 more, but we have one question here that's set. So feel free to add on any more questions if you guys have. But so Maeve is saying, how can I bring up to my friends that I'm struggling?
Oh, that's a good question. I would find some people that are safe, that you feel safe with, and you have a dialogue, and you talk about what you need from them, and that might be, hey, I'm struggling. It would be great if you would text me a couple times a day just to see how I'm doing, and be assertive about what you need. And again, it's very important that you are doing this with people that are safe, and share your values.
We have one more question. This will be our last question for the day. Oh,
You're
also Maeve
welcome.
says thank you. But the last question from Laura is, what are some strategies you can use to stay on top of your tasks and to overall keep your self-disciplined?
Routine and intention. I mean, routine and intention. And there are some self-help books. There's some resources out there. Organization. Get yourself a day planner, and that has helped me immensely. It's just right. Just we're so, and I'm older, so I didn't always have a computer. So I had to write things down. And so I actually went back and just got myself a day planner, because I had to get off the screen. And that's the other thing I would recommend. Limit your screen time. It is, especially if you're young. Especially if you're young, try to limit your screen time, because it's easy to get caught up in um, the news, and the news, they make money by making news. So, and some people get bullied online. So do limit your social media. And if you're gonna, journaling is really good to help deal with stress. I would put a pen to paper. I mean, if that's your thing, just like I said, try to limit your screen time as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Melissa, for joining us
That
and
was
giving
my
us.
pleasure.
Yes, you gave such great advice. Everyone, please take the information that Melissa has said and really understand it, really think deeply about it, because it's very valuable information. Again, thank you, Melissa. And
You're welcome.
everyone, please know that this podcast episode will be posted on YouTube afterwards. And again, of course, um, you can receive service hours for watching the Mindful Connections podcast and completing our after episode survey. A large majority of you came from the interview opportunity. So go back to that interview opportunity and then fill out the survey monkey as well. Let's be mindful and rise up for ourselves and for each other. All right, everyone, we will see you on our next episode and have a great one.